that level there are differences, and you can't just negate those differences, but you have to become what you accommodate the differences rather than what live from those prejudices. Neither you tell yourself everything is one, because it is not. There are differences, right? But whenever there are differences, we create situations where there is certain amount of intolerance for those differences without us even knowing it. So once you begin to understand that, hey, I have certain orientations which are unhealthy orientations, then you have to undo it, accommodate those differences. So therefore, any idea that you have which is all women are like that, that is something which you really have to, first bring it out, examine, and you have to undo it. Or every, let's say, a person who belongs to this religion is like that. You need to be careful about that. Okay, you have to make your thinking far more nuanced, because otherwise, again, you build on that picture. The difference is also, let's say, when you are living at home and people are going to be different. Okay? And when there is a difference, and the closer you are, what happens? Each one tries to be the way you want the person to be. What does it mean? That you are not accommodating differences. Okay, so that means knowingly or unknowingly we have agenda, we have an ideal of how this person should be, and we somehow keep on trying to make that person to be what we want that person to be. But that person is a different person, and the person actually begins to feel stifled. You can't tolerate, claustrophobic, right? So this is something which is that the tendency to control is something which we all have without realizing it. So I have to tell you one story, which is a very interesting story, where how people try to control without even realizing it. When we lived in Bangkok, we were invited for some kind of some Janmashtami function. So we all went, and there was some puja, and after the puja was over, the host wanted to show how living abroad they have taught their kids Bhagavad Gita. So she's calling her daughter to stand in front of this huge crowd, which is like 80-100 people, right? And say, now beta, start chanting chapter, I don't know what, the second chapter of the 15th chapter or 12th chapter, whatever, some chapter of the Gita. Now this little girl is least interested in doing it, right? So that means it's not her need at all, but whose need it is? It's parents' need to show everyone how she has inculcated certain cultural values in their children. So she almost drags this little girl who is, you can see from her whole demeanor how she's behaving, her facial expressions. She's not at all interested. She's doing like this, and she's standing like that. So she's not interested. But the mother has this pressure of, making her do this. Now, as soon as she opens her mouth, right? So first of all, when she comes like that, she tries to say, "Oh, beta, stand straight. You should not be, standing like that." Then she starts chanting, and she is like, her voice is a little low because she's reluctant. She doesn't want to do it, right? Then she says, "Oh no, beta, chant loudly." And then she starts saying something, then she starts correcting her pronunciations in between. So by the time she has finished, her mom has intervened about 10 times, telling her how she should be. And this in front of everyone, but she thinks that she is doing good because she wants her daughter to look perfect. Okay, and then at the end everybody obviously starts clapping, and this little, she was a little girl, she was not like very 5-6 years old or whatever. While people were clapping, she started crying, because she just could not take all this pressure that was being put on her, and the mother was totally puzzled. She was so oblivious to the fact that why she's crying. She's like, oh, everybody's clapping, everybody's so impressed, and why this girl is crying. So what is going on in the mind of the mother? What is going on? A different story altogether. She is operating from her story of how she wants her child to learn Indian values, how she wants her child to perform in front of everyone, how she wants everybody to appreciate her. That's the story which is going on in her mind. She doesn't know what's happening to the child. This is what we call control. Control means you want that child to be how you have decided that child to be, and you are totally oblivious to what is going on with the child. Okay, and this we do, and you don't know that you are trying to impose, you are trying to control. And what it does, it destroys the person, and you think you are doing good for the person. Okay, so therefore this control issue, and then people, the minute I say that, then the people say, oh, so does that mean that we have to leave kids to do whatever they want? So we create two scenarios: either we totally control, or we totally don't interfere and don't say anything. But in between those two scenarios, there are how many options? There are infinite options which we don't look at. We have made our minds in a way that we only think about two possibilities. One is like totally taking over, and the other one is totally leaving everything to the other person. In between, there are many different options, and that is what we have to create a buddhi which presents different creative options of intervening intelligently. And in whichever option that you have chosen, you have to let the other person whose life is in question participate. You can't make choices for somebody else. You have to teach, you have to make the person participate and take ownership of all the decisions, that even if you have taken decision for them, they have to feel as though it is their decision. Because unless the person feels that it is my decision, the person is doing whatever that person is doing only to oblige you. And as long as the person is doing something to oblige you and not from one's own volition, the person is never going to be totally happy. So even if you think this is good, you need to get that person and somehow make the person see the value. The value of value, making the other person see the value of value and not imposing your values, is something which is what we call accommodation. Because you will create a child with resentment, and whether it is verbalized or it is not verbalized, the child will keep that whole thing. As I told you, I think I told you a story of this guy who wanted to be a cricketer, and then his parents were doctors. I told you, right? Yeah, I told you that story. And did I? I don't know, I have so many classes where I told what. So just in very brief, the story goes that the child was very good at cricket, and he went for under 19 to England and all that. But both parents were IT professionals, and they felt that the child has to have secure future, because if you're not in this national team, what will you do? So they said, okay, now you do cricket on the side, and then you also go and study abroad. So now that's not going to happen, right? You can't become a cricketer and then go and study abroad and all. So the child did that out of pressure, but he was nursing this resentment for such a long time, and he himself didn't realize it, but he began to realize it when he was working on Wall Street, and every time in a group when people disagreed with him, he would just react, and that is not good for him, right? So he wanted to help himself, and he came to us and he says, I just, and cognitively he knows very well that people have what? Right to their own opinion. They will say something which is other than what he has to say, and he has to listen. I mean, that he knows. But it was creating this emotional reaction in him because unconsciously it reminded him of what? Every time somebody has an opinion which is other than his opinion, unconscious mind connected it to what? He wanted to become something, somebody else had another opinion, they convinced him to do something which he really wanted to do, and that created that imbalance and anger. So that given thing got triggered onto the present situation without him even realizing it. So that's the thing, we operate the unconscious mind, and the connections that unconscious mind has created, they get triggered in the present situation, and you operate from there even though you yourself realize that this is not the right thing to do. That is amazing. Okay, but the minute you begin to understand that, hey, my behavior right now is governed by not what consciously my mind understands, but what the data and the connections my unconscious is holding, then you begin to undo that. When you begin to undo that, you really get rid of all your resentments, whatever your anger, frustrations that you're holding on in your unconscious. So that means you create a resentment in the child that will stay until the child looks into it, processes it, and understands this is what has happened to me. Because maybe you have done something for the good of the child. It's not that you are doing something, but in the perception of the child, if this is not what the child wanted, you are creating that divide. So therefore, accommodation is a huge thing. Accommodation means, yes, you have opinion, yes, you have a role to play as whatever, as a spouse, as a child, but you can't impose your opinions. If you want to do something to change, you have to make the other person participate. Without that participation, no matter what you have and how good it is, it will create some resentment. Okay?
The art has to be in how to convince him to think that
absolutely
that he is thinking this, he's on the same wavelength.
Absolutely, yeah, it doesn't get done. Your vision has to become
the other
his
vision also.
Exactly.
Not easy with the child.
It's not easy with the child.
Not easy with anyone.
And one also then has to revise one's own vision also, because that person also has to be given a chance to equally
his vision to you and exactly. Your opinion.
Exactly. Because otherwise every communication we have is, I have something in mind and I'm trying to what? Very subtly it happens. It's not like you know, right? You're trying to impose all what you think on to the other person. You're trying to convince the other person. And the other person is actually trying to do the same with you, and we don't engage in a real communication. Even though we communicate, real communication is what? Where you really are open and you listen to the other person's standpoint and you're willing to revise your own standpoint. And if you have a standpoint, you not impose but make the person see what you see. Even Vedanta works like that. Vedanta is not I give you information. The teacher who's really a teacher is my vision becomes your vision. And it's not because I'm saying it, you are doing it. It's what you understand it, and that's why you're doing it. So that's why I keep saying it's a teaching, it's not an advice. It's not like imposition. Okay. So accommodation, that tendency to control is, either it is in terms of the prejudices that we hold, or in our personal communication, our tendency to impose. And that happens also with reference to bosses, right? You are playing a role of a boss, and what is a natural tendency? You feel that you are the decision maker, and you totally impose what you think on others. And they are receiving salary from you, so what happens? Even if they have some other opinion, generally what happens? Yeah, they don't even, if they don't even have enough if you don't create an environment where people have the capacity to say what they think, at least say what they think. You are the boss, you have to make the final decision, that's fine. But when people have fear in expressing what they really think, then who's the loser? Who's the loser? You don't get, exactly. You don't get different opinions, which actually enriches your own decision making. So this is why some of these people are quite smart. Steve Jobs once made a statement. He says, if I'm paying so much to somebody to come and work for me, I don't want to tell him what he should do, I want him to tell me what I should do. Right? Because you have to draw from from the talents of people that you have. You're hiring them not just for them to be just follow you. You're hiring them for their own skills, and they all have value added, and they have to feel as though they have a value added. So that's why when somebody comes to work in the morning, if they feel that their opinions count, they will come happily. Otherwise it will become just a job. And when it becomes just a job, what the person is the person performing optimally? No, it's underutilized. And it is something where the whole organization is not working at an optimal level, because all the talents are not utilized in an optimum manner. So therefore, this control is a huge thing. This top down is something which has been happening in probably all societies, but to change that mindset is a very, very important thing, and that is what we say accommodation. It's a huge thing to follow, where I genuinely believe that I have so much to learn from the differences. Differences don't create a problem. Differences become things that will embellish you. That you believe in and you act from it, your life will change. Okay, because you will also constantly revise your own opinions, and you will also move forward in life, and you will let others also bloom. So therefore, accommodation is kshantihi. The next value is arjavam. Arjavam means straightforwardness. Rajavaha bhavaha is arjavam. A rope can be either bent or it can be straight, right? Our whole being can be either all bent or it could be straight. What is straightforwardness? It means alignment between what you think, what you say, and what you do. There is an alignment. Okay, so let's first look at the alignment between what you think and what you say. Many a times we tell things in front of the person which we don't mean at all. We flatter the person and we say, you're so this, you're so this, and that's not really what we are thinking. Okay, So that means there is a non-alignment between what I think and what I say. Now, if you don't see, for one thing is very, very important in this alignment is, let's say you don't think very well of that other person, but you are not obliged to speak. You don't have to say. So it is not that being straightforward means whatever comes to your mind, you just say it out. When you say it, it has to be aligned to what you think. But everything that you think, you need not say. Right? So therefore, there are certain sentences in the Upanishads which say Satyam Vada. Satyam Vada means say what you think, okay? But Priyam Vada. Priyam Vada means understand what impact that, sometimes people, just come and they make comments which are not necessary, which may be true, that may be how they are thinking, but you need not say it because nobody has asked you for your opinion. Right? So everything that you think you need not say, but whatever you say has to be in keeping with what you think. Then the Upanishads add one more nuance. That nuance is a beautiful nuance. It says Ritam Vada. Satyam api Ritam Vada. What is the difference between Satyam and Ritam? Satyam is to say what I think. Ritam is, it is your responsibility to ensure that what you say is right. Because you can be saying what you think, but what you think may be wrong. So you also have a responsibility to ensure that what you think is right. Okay? Ritam, Ritvik, that Rukara, Belu, Am Chanan, Ritam Vada.
How will that be?
Sorry?
How can that be? I mean, you are saying what you think, but your thinking might not be correct.
Yes.
So because you say what you think and somebody might give another opinion, you might change your opinion.
That's true.
But if you don't say what you think, how will you get the feedback?
Yeah. See, the thing is that sometimes what happens is when you don't know, you have to start with the position of I don't know and I think like this. But if you start with the position that this is right, when you say this is what our teacher used to say, it's a very simple thing. What you are saying is very true. Whenever you are giving an opinion, right, if you add one more sentence, this is what I think right now, then there is true. That is 100% correct. But this is how it is like this is how it is, not true. Okay? So when you are giving an opinion and when you add this thing that this is what I feel, this is what I think, you're fine. Because that very position means that you are willing to change and revise and look at it differently. In this case, for example, I can say that in this whole spiritual world, when people assume this whole thing of a guru, many times they have all good intentions. They don't think that they are misguiding people, but they propagate ideas which are unhealthy. Be detached from the world. So that means there is Satyam because they think like that, but it is not Ritam. So that means if they are assuming role of a teacher, it is their responsibility to make sure that they understand things accurately. Otherwise, out of good intention, they start giving you wrong messages, and the people would try to live by the messages that you give. You are doing a disservice. Being a teacher is a huge responsibility. You have to make sure that what you are saying is accurate and it is, not...
Your knowledge is complete.
Yeah, before you say something. Okay? And if you don't know, you just say, and like our teacher used to at times, he said, yeah, this is what Shastra says, which is what I'm doing, but this is my opinion about something, and that could be another, it's just one of the opinions. So even while teaching, he is very, very lucid about what is something which is really the reality, which is what his opinion, which can be, it's just like one person's opinion, which is subject to contention. All that, your mind has to be clear. You yourself have to be clear about what is it that you know properly, what is it that you subject to change, and you have to communicate things like that. Then you are an aligned human being. The second thing about alignment is, let's say, I want to tell you one story, which is this thing about alignment between what you think and what you speak. So last time when we were in Rishikesh, one of the participants, he told us a funny story. So he said that one day this man used to go and walk in the park every day. And when he was walking, he saw a group of women sitting and chatting. So like every day they were all very busy, engaged, chatting a lot. So every day he used to notice, right? Now one day he noticed that all of them were there, but nobody was talking. So he was very puzzled. He says, yeah, every day they are all so engaged and they are talking and all that. And today, how come everybody is so quiet? So he went up to them and said, so why aren't you, as bubbly and as engaged today? Why you're all so quiet? The lady said, because all of us are present today. What does it mean?
Somebody not to be there to be able to bitch about it.
Yeah. So when somebody is not there, you would say things about that person, right? But when the person is there, you will not say it. So now if everybody is there, they can't bitch about anyone. So that's why they're all quiet, right? So that means it's very, that you think one thing about the person and you say something else. This is, we actually, I think almost all of us do it, right? So one has to be careful about that. What you have to say is that if I cannot say whatever I think in front of that person, then I should refrain from it. If I'm able to say it to that person, then yes, I can say it. But if I'm not wanting to say it in front of that, I have a responsibility not to talk about it. That little awareness is something.
What you say, you should not be hurtful.
Absolutely.
So you have to keep ahimsa in mind.
Yeah, you have to keep ahimsa. Absolutely.
Unless it's that important, then it doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
But otherwise, just shut up.
Otherwise, just shut up. So then somebody used to say, yeah, but if another participant, it's interesting when all these people get together and the debates they have. So it's funny. So then she used to say, yeah, but in the parties, the only thing people do is to talk about each other. So if you don't participate in that, people think you're a boring person. So then I said, that means we have created a norm which itself is based on such a mediocrity. And you need to lift yourself up. You can't just, in the name of conforming, you can't just stay at that level. So that's why that same man, he used to teach because the kids also have this huge peer pressure thing, right? People are doing this, so I want to do it. He says, you have to learn to be a leader and not just follower. You set trends. You are a trend setter. You are not just somebody who follows somebody else's, habits or whatever. So that means if you find yourself in a party, you can always start a conversation which is far more interesting, engaging. It's not like, because you're not gossiping, you just feel left out and you don't participate. You continue to participate, but bring a value to your presence where you change, you become a trend setter. Don't withdraw. Okay. So that means, because that is another thing people keep telling me, that oh, the more I become spiritual, I find all these things meaningless. But you know, we human beings, we are social entities. The more you start to withdraw, there will be some loneliness, some isolation. We need people.
It's also that when you have this, you think that you're superior to the rest of the
Absolutely.
rest of the crowd.
Yeah, this
We are
holier
all
than.
mundane thing with mind.
Yeah.
Spiritually and
Absolutely.
intellectually evolved.
Yeah, this is what we call this whole spiritual ego, and one has to be very, very careful about that. Okay, because a lot of people used to ask me that, oh, so now you still go out and meet people. I said, I love meeting people. What's wrong with that? You know, so don't you find them boring? I said, no, I find them most fascinating, because from each one you can learn something. When you begin to engage in a different manner, and not in this just normal manner, I love to get into the minds of people and see how they think, what are the values they have, what makes them who they are. And there are so many lessons, and I use all those lessons in my classes. It's a huge learning experience. My classes would be so boring, I would be giving nothing, all technical things, if I were not engaging with people and not learning from them. Every time I interact, and I truly feel that it's a learning experience for me. I don't exactly thank God that I don't have this holier than thou attitude at all.
Because people have this image they create about teacher or Vedanta
Yeah, this.
and speaking like this and not going to a dinner or
Yeah, exactly.
not enjoying any entertainment. So it's like you're above it all, but it's like you don't live your life anymore.
Exactly, and that's a facade which is not necessary. Okay, so that's why once I went to the Namita and I had gone to a restaurant, and exactly that image of Vedanta teacher. So when somebody was asking her, who's this lady with whom you were at the restaurant, and she said, she's my Vedanta teacher. It's like, wow, is she your Vedanta? Because they have a totally different image.
You were in a mini skirt. You really feel them all.
Maybe you're sipping wine.
So exactly. So that means that just does not fit into, but that is a created image. It has got nothing to do with, So therefore, staying on the ground and enjoying life, right? But creating your own meanings and not be a mediocre that's real freedom. You can be at any point in anywhere with anyone, but by your presence you elevate the atmosphere rather than what you come down. That is, then you are not afraid of being anywhere. You can go and you can enjoy, and the whole world is for you to what? Yeah, play with certain amount of freedom without being weighed down. That is the real freedom. And this is why when we did in Bangkok, right, we did this thing about a wise person. One of the characteristics of that wise person is what? Prasanna Chetasaha. Prasanna Chetasaha is what? Cheerfulness. Cheerfulness is not disinterest, is not the characteristic of a wise person. Natural cheerfulness. Why? Because you are able to live in this life without any burdens. You are engaging totally, but there is an inner leisure. That then you know that you are free. That freedom that Vedanta is talking about is not by rejecting the world, being away from the world, calling the world as materialist, and you being spiritual. All these are, I don't know where these ideas come from. Because our spirituality doesn't create a division like that. Our spirituality is living in the world because of your understanding and proper perspective. There is freedom. And our teacher, like when I told in Rishikesh, our story about one day people ask, so tell us about yourself, how Vedanta helped you. When I told the story, Namita was there and she says, wow, this is such an unusual story of a spiritual person, right? Where my teacher himself told me to go back and work after I finished my 3.5-year course. He himself suggested I get married to Surya. So that means he himself was asking me to do things which what others would say, oh, now you have studied, so you have to take up this role of a guru, you have to take sannyasa, you have to do this. He was totally free in his mind, because his whole vision of spirituality is what? You are in midst of things, you are fully engaged in the things, you are doing everything really well, and at the same time the wisdom that you have gives you that freedom. And Lord Krishna was
He was looking at your
profile.
He was looking at how he could help you.
Absolutely, in my
He was
growth.
not looking at how do I, you would otherwise have started perpetuating his name 30 years before.
Exactly.
He wasn't interested in that.
In that.
So he
Absolutely.
was selfless in that respect.
Absolutely.
It wasn't that he wanted you to go and propagate Dhyana, so that's what he gave you.
Absolutely. That was not at all his
The
agenda.
mission was how he can help you.
How I can bloom into a really complete human being. What are the experiences that I need? And I need different kinds of experiences to, let my personality really, take that, that stage where I am a holistic growth. And that's why even the first time I wanted to attend 3.5-year course, he told me no. He said, no, you're still too young and you still have to be out there and you have to be working and you have to nurture yourself. And you need to nourish that little sense of being. You need that. So that means absolutely, that whole, multifaceted, we human beings are multifaceted. And we need to, pay attention to all these different areas, different strengths we have, and we need to bloom in each of these areas. And that takes time. And that's what a spirituality is about. Putting everything in perspective and having a larger vision which guides every facet of our being. That is beautiful. Then you develop everything. And this is how is Lord Krishna portrayed? How a serious person? Not at all. He's very mastikhor, mischievous, cheerful. What was he, what he was playing flute. Flute means what? His creativity. And at the same time, when it came to decision making, very lucid, operated from a lot of wisdom, but a light character. Okay, so this light character, not in the sense of frivolous, but not this serious and creating, having all the burdens of life. Okay, so that is really a spiritual person who is very versatile in many different things and engaging fully, but the wisdom is something which keeps the person light. The challenges don't weigh you down, because every role that you play is going to have some challenge. He had many challenges. His life was not an easy life. Okay, but when you become bigger than the challenges, then life it doesn't weigh you down. Okay, so this is what that whole thing about what Arjavam. The Arjavam is what you feel, you say, and what you say, you follow up with action. That second Arjavam is also very important, because many times people have good intentions, they say things which they really mean, but they don't follow it up with actions. So there is one thing that became a joke, because in India, people are very warm people, And they are very nice and genuinely, so when I and Surya just moved to India, so we would meet some people at parties and all, and they would be very happy to meet us and all. And then they would say, oh yeah, come home, come home, come home. And Surya would like really think that, yeah, they are calling us home. And at the end of the party, he says, yeah, but they didn't give us their address. They didn't give us a telephone number. They didn't even, we don't know anything where they live, and they didn't set up any date. But they just, yeah, come home, come home, come home. And it's not like that they were superficial. Please understand, right? They meant well, and they said what they were really feeling good. But what was lacking? Action. Action to follow up with that intention. Many times this is something which is very common. Aujo. Bye, but aujo. Yeah, exactly. Right? So that means that, and once you actually, when you say something and you mean it, and if you follow up, in the eyes of the other person, the image of you is totally different. There is certain amount of, your words have weight. The person very unknowingly said, yeah, when this person says something, the person means it. You really take the words of that person seriously. It happens almost unconsciously. The strength of your personality comes out when there is an alignment. When you say something, the impact it has on somebody else is going to be different because you are aligned. And this is what also I think is somebody told me recently that they have practiced this Arjavam with their kids. A lot of times we promise something to our kids and we don't follow up. Said, I'll do this for you. And the child, what is an innocent child, is really waiting for that to happen. And when that doesn't happen, the child is disappointed. The child cannot but be disappointed because this is Arjavam. Okay. Now, for some reason, I think it's Anubha who told me that any time I say something, I make sure that I do it. And if in case I don't do it, I have to explain. Very important. Extremely important. That gives a child, there is this whole thing of trust. The child will then begin to trust you. Otherwise, parents say something and they didn't follow up only. There is this basic lack of trust. They may or may not verbalize it. They may not say anything to you, but there is this whole thing, their whole value system, which is a programmed value system of what is appropriate behavior, it gets all shaken. At a very deep level, their psyche gets confused because on one hand they love parents, on one hand they trust parents, but on one hand they see something which is not aligned. And when they see something which is not aligned, they don't know how to account for it. Okay, so there's this Arjavam of what you say, that when you begin to follow that will actually, you will become a well integrated human being. Even in terms of teaching of Vedanta, imagine you can always come and make this whole amazing presentation about how things are and how, what the right values. But when you go out there and you don't follow what you say, what use is that? And in fact, the weight of your words will not be the weight of somebody who's following it. That's why when people, when we ask people for feedback about our class, about our retreats or whatever, it's interesting when people give comments. some comments are about how I present the subject matter in the class and all, but a lot of comments are about how I and Surya behave. So that means people are not only looking at, even they don't realize, but people are not only looking at what you are saying, people are observing how you are outside the classroom, how you behave. And if something is incongruent, something is not aligned, they actually can figure out. This person is saying one thing, but the person is actually what? Doing something totally different. Okay, so that means don't underestimate people. People have this non-verbal communication you do. You give away so much, or a non-deliberate communication that you do. You give away so much of yourself. Right? So that means that alignment is something which is very, very important. What you say is what you do. The strength of your character improves what? Manifold. So this is why I kept giving this example. Our teacher talks a lot about compassion. Okay? But when he talks about compassion, it is different from we talking about compassion, because the extent to which he has integrated that the value of compassion in his life is manifold more than any one of us. So I gave very simple examples, but that gives away the person. It's not some big thing. Okay, so as I said that I gave an example at this that when we were in Bangkok, he himself was what he had a heart. He wasn't well, so he was in the hospital. So when you are in need of care because you have had surgery and at that time. He was in a very nice hospital, so he was in pain. So I wanted to call a nurse, because I thought that you call a nurse because you don't want to see somebody that you love in pain. So when I was calling the nurse, he would say no. So I said, why not, Swamiji? I can call the nurse. He says, no, she has so many people to take care of. Why should I add her work? I can handle this pain. In this small thing, when he is in pain, he is thinking about what? Overloading the other person. Who thinks like that? Okay? Even in your times of genuine need, your focus is somebody else and not bothering the other person unnecessarily, as long as you can manage. That is another level of sensitivity. Another level altogether. I don't think any one of us, everyone will be, I'm in pain, come and take care of me, The second time he looked at some nurse and he said, I see some sadness in her eyes and I want to help her. When you are in pain, who will notice sadness in somebody else's eyes? And who, after noticing, will say, I want to do something to help her? That means in these small, it's not that he is holding a class, he's talking about compassion in these small behaviors of his, which seem like nothing. He's giving away his real self, which is what an evolved human being this person is. The sensitivities that this person has are way above any one of us, right? So this is where when you say and you act according to what you say, you are a different person. That alignment is a huge thing. The thought, the speech and action. Okay? Once you are aligned, your presence is a different presence. You don't have to show off, you stand out. Okay, so that is Arjavam. Then the next value is Acharya Upasanam. We have time, no? We have. Okay. The next value is Acharya Upasanam. Any teacher when you want to learn from the person, you have to know whether it's Vedanta or any other subject matter, right? When you want to learn from the person, you have to have what? Certain respect for the person. If you have no respect whatsoever, will you be able to learn that subject matter? No. So therefore, the teacher is something, that's why this whole Guru Shishya Parampara. This Guru Shishya Parampara is an amazing thing, right? That in all, whether it is dance or it is music or it is what people would go and stay in Gurukul, study with the teacher for 12 years, Vedanta Shastra and everything. Okay, where there is a close interaction with the teacher, you become part of the family of the teacher. You create a situation where the teacher transfers everything that the person has learned onto you. And you also observe how the teacher behaves. And you imbibe all the things which are subtle outside the classroom. Okay? So that whole thing about Guru Shishya Parampara was an amazing thing that we Indian, the Indian culture has that. Okay? There is this whole thing about imbibing the entire thing, the many facets of that art or that knowledge or whatever, and making you into this complete being. For that to happen, you need to have what? The tremendous respect. You ask anybody, people who have learnt any art form or anything, like all of us, how we look upon Swamiji. It's not that he wanted anything, but when that person has made so much contribution to your life, how can you not, have that high regard for that person? Okay, so, and that's true for mathematics, that's true for physics. You have gone to school and you've learned many things from many people, but a few teachers you may still remember. And who are those teachers?
Who taught well or went out of the way to do an extra.
Exactly. Okay, who went out of their way to what? Make you who you are. Make you, exactly. Right? You still think about them because their contribution to your life is something which is not an ordinary contribution. Okay? Now, in every other learning, you go to learn with a clean slate. When you go and learn mathematics, when you go and learn music, when you go and learn dance, you don't have any preconceived notion. But when you come to Vedanta, and what is Vedanta talking about? The nature of I, nature of the universe, nature of the cause of the universe. Do you come with a clean slate? You have hundreds of opinions. Okay? And if you think you're spiritual and if you've read many books, you've collected lots and lots and lots of ideas. Whose job is easier when you come to a teacher? Teacher's job is easier when you come with a clean slate or when you come stuffed with ideas? Clean slate. So the teacher of Vedanta has a difficult job to do because in the classroom each one has come up with hundreds of ideas of oneself. Not a clean slate. And the teacher has to make each one of them undo their what? All these other ideas that they have picked up, undo, and then what? Start putting right ideas, and all of them are not uniform in the confusion. One person has one confusion in one area, the other one has in the other area, and while that confusion is undone, if the teacher is not careful, what will happen? If you hold a confusion and you believe it is right, now the teacher is showing that this is not the right way of looking at it. What gets activated?
First is resistance.
Resistance. The first reaction is resistance. Because now I'm asking you to change what you believed in, and what you have been believing in for years. That's not an easy thing at all. Because the first reaction is resistance. And especially if you have had somebody who has told you certain information, and if you have bought that information as reality, and if that begins to be challenged, there is even bigger resistance, because you have really invested in those ideas. And not only you have invested in those ideas, you have some affinity, emotional connection with that person from whom you have received that idea. So that means when that is negated, what happens? You have to work at two levels. One is the cognitive intellectual resistance that you have. The other one is what? That emotional connection that you have with that person. Now that person is being proven wrong according to you. That is a big thing. Okay? So that means then it can at times come as what? Anger towards the teacher. That resistance, if you don't take care, the student can become angry towards what? As a defensive mechanism. What happens is you become angry towards the teacher. I'll give you this is a true example. Okay, that at the end of our course, we were all we studied for 3.5 years, and at the end of the course, we were all asked to talk. We were asked to talk about how was the course, and everybody was obviously saying amazing things. For one person, there was a huge issue because she had learned with somebody else something else, and whatever our teacher was saying was contradicting what she had learned earlier from somebody else. And she was actually holding a lot of resentment and anger towards our teacher, because it seemed as though when the ideas get negated in your mind, you process it as what? This person is criticizing the other person. And that you can't handle. So that you feel, oh my God, this person is nice. Why is this person criticizing this person? So that means you are unable to distinguish between ideas and people. Okay? When a physics teacher is telling you time and space is relative and not absolute, is the person criticizing Newtonian physics? Yes, the person is negating the physics, the ideas which existed prior to the discovery that time and space is relative. The ideas which existed before are invalid. But is it a critique towards the person? Is it? No. What happens is, in the minds of people, the ideas and people get associated, especially in spirituality. So when you negate the idea, people add, and what people say? The person is criticizing the other person. It has got nothing to do with criticism. It is to do with looking at ideas and making sure that you understand ideas accurately. And if you have the certain opinions which are not in keeping with reality, you have to revise your opinions. And teacher's job is to make you see what is the reality. So therefore, the teacher becomes subject to, in the psychological terms, transference. Transference means that at times people project everything onto the teacher. Okay? They at times can become angry, at times they can become very needy. Because if you, that whole thing, at times they become, it's like they want constant approval of the teacher, all kinds of, what are your deep needs, they all get projected onto the teacher. And the teacher has to do what? Help you through the whole process, each one, and make you what? Yeah, exactly. Aware of this and overcome all of this so that you can own up to this amazing teaching. That requires patience, that requires sensitivity. And one thing is very important, that our teacher was so careful that people don't become over dependent on him. So the whole spirituality is not about you being this big guru and what people coming and running to you for every small little thing. He says, if I am guru, I make you strong enough to handle your life. I have to give you that which will make you strong. Not that you have to keep running to me, that creating that emotional dependency is not the real teacher. So that means to find a teacher like that and to manage human beings and their needs and make them into complete being, Vedanta teacher has a huge job to play, huge role to play in shaping the people. So our teacher used to say, people come to me like stones. What do I need to do? Chip off. Exactly. I'm a sculptor. I have to chip this much, chip here, there, and finally create what? A beautiful statue. Beautiful. And this is exactly, he says, my job. Each one comes with one's own background, one's own belief system, one's own issues. You have to be there with that person, help the person, but help without creating that dependency. Make the person see the reality, transfer what you see and make it into what? The vision of the other person without imposing, and make that other person a beautiful being. That is a tough job. Okay? So therefore, in order for that thing to take place, you need to have, the person should have certain, it's a relationship, should have what? Certain amount of confidence and respect for the teacher. Because unless the person has that, this whole job will not be complete. Now, the problem occurs when the teacher is not completely grown and has one's own needs. Then what happens? Somebody comes to you with the good intention and good heart, and you yourself have what? Needs of being great and being guru and all that. If you operate from your own needs, what happens to this exchange? There is an abuse. There is an abuse in relationship. Okay, and that is something that you see all the time. What are the forms of abuse that happen? Gurus become rich. The minute you have confidence of that person, and the minute you make the person dependent on you, what happens? You can just fleece the person without the person realizing it. There is also what that you hear in the newspaper all the time. What? The physical abuse. All the needs of the teacher, when the teacher is not in so that means that you have respect for the teacher, but make sure it's the right teacher. Because otherwise, if I give only one-sided message by saying that what an amazing job the teacher does, and one must have, look up, then what happens is that you create this thing where you lose your discretion and you put all your trust into a wrong person. And when you put your trust in the wrong person, it is something which is highly destructive. A teacher deserves respect, but make sure that what you have the right teacher. Otherwise, it can lead to what the financial abuse, the physical abuse, or it can even sometimes it can also lead to an abuse, which is a very subtle abuse, which is controlling, that the teachers start controlling the students, right? So once I went to one of somebody's place, and he says, yeah, these are the 4 people that I teach Upanishads, but after the class is over, all those 4 students are washing his dishes, cooking food for him, doing washing his clothes. So it's like those 4 have been made into his servants. No need. Okay, so therefore the teacher, becoming a teacher is a big responsibility. How you help the person and it make sure that you don't have the needs and not using this role to manipulate others. If you're using that role to manipulate others, and then plus giving this message that how teacher is important and how you have to give your everything to the teacher and give up your ego and surrender to the teacher, that is a dangerous thing. So in all these values, to have a proper, we go from here to there. To have a proper perspective on things, see where the huge contribution is and stay away from giving so much to a wrong person. These are all discretion that we have to, the discernment in life is a very important thing. Who you trust, who you learn from. Okay, so that Acharya Upasanam, make sure that you enter into a relationship with a person who deserves it and is not going to abuse, but is going to give you the freedom and make you what? Flower into this complete human being. This is why Vedanta is a very good thing. The starting point of Vedanta Acharya is not that you are this condemned, you are this helpless soul. The starting point of Vedanta is what? You are the whole. You are complete. And what is teacher's job? To lift the veil and make you see your own fullness. Much less room for abuse. Because the teacher's job is to make you see your fullness and not what? To make you feel that I am small and insignificant and I need to hang on or latch on to this big person. Beautiful starting point. Okay, so Acharya Upasanam, Shaucham, we will see next time. Is it okay? Shaucham is cleanliness. The cleanliness, I will not do it this time, but is of 2 types. Bahya Shaucham and Antah Shaucham. External cleanliness and internal cleanliness. So we'll talk about it next time. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.